everybody has a vision. Everyone listening to this recording has a vision. It's either a proactive, future-oriented vision, or it's a negative vision, or it's one that's just apathy, meaning you're where you are today. The vision is there, it's in your head, but I suggest everyone listening to be more proactive and write one on paper, because it's the only way to be, right? I mean, we're either growing or we're dying, is what I often say. So let's make a conscious decision to grow versus let time pass by.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the show. Today, we've got Chris Spurvey joining us in the mastermind. Chris is an entrepreneur, keynote speaker, podcast host, and author of the best-selling business book, It's Time to Sell. After consciously choosing entrepreneurship as a means to create a better life for his family, Chris realized that negative beliefs about sales were holding him back from taking his ventures to the next level. He saw this as a major hurdle to not only his business, but to the businesses of virtually every other entrepreneur out there. So Chris went on to work on himself and found a way to sell that felt right. Chris spearheaded the growth of Plato Consulting to the point where it was acquired by one of the largest management consulting firms in the world, KPMG. In the process, he sold over $300 million in consulting services. And following the acquisition of that company, Chris turned his focus to helping other non-sales sellers find a way to grow their revenue in a consistent and stress-free manner. So Chris, welcome to the show, my friend.
Brad, well, thank you very much for that warm welcome. I often wish my wife would hear those introductions. She'd know who she's married to then.
Yeah. Being married myself, I know that sometimes those aren't the words that they might use to describe us.
I guarantee you. No, thanks so much for that warm welcome. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this. It sounds like we have a lot in common.
Yeah, absolutely. And one place I'd love just to kick it off. So in the intro, I mentioned that you consciously chose entrepreneurship. So what did that mean to you? What did that process look like for you to consciously choose entrepreneurship as a path to really help better your life and the life of your family?
Yeah, when I hear you ask that question, my head goes back to being quite young. I'm going to say maybe 12, 13, 14. And I observed my dad buying. So my dad was a general manager for a printing company. And I used to observe him buying entrepreneur magazines and buying books by Zig Ziglar. And, he would take small little steps towards starting a business of his own. Because he was in the printing industry, he used to go and take pictures of minor hockey league players and start to create little hockey cards and different things like that. But he never really got out of the starting gate with the initiatives. And I just saw how it really hurt him. He wanted to be an entrepreneur, but just didn't know how, right? And he had a family. He had the burden of the burden of a family. That doesn't really sound very good, but that's what he had. So he was convinced that he couldn't do it. I guess from that point on, entrepreneurship in my mind was something that I really wanted to explore and do. And so I consciously made that decision that I'm going to be an entrepreneur, because I just saw it as a ticket to fulfillment and freedom and kind of having no limit on the abilities to earn money and do and be of service and so on. So that's where my head goes. Really, the conscious decision came from observing my father, who could never seem to be able to do it.
So what did that look like for you in the beginning? Did you start off chasing that entrepreneurial dream from a young age, or did you go down the corporate path and then transition into entrepreneurship? Let's dive into your story a little bit, and I'd love to understand.
Well, yeah. So, the answer to that question is I've played on both sides of that equation. So around the time I graduated, a couple of years before graduating from university, I ended up starting my first company, which was an internet consulting company, or an internet. We basically designed websites for other companies in the area. And this is back in 1994, 1995, back before anybody really knew there was an internet. And so we started that business. Fast forward 2 years later, and I had a dream of getting married. I was at this time, let's say 23 or 24, sold that business and ended up going to work for an insurance company, and then worked for that insurance company for 5 or 6 years. And basically the entrepreneurial itch started to form again. And I began to do things on the side while working for the insurance company. And all that bubbled up to really 2006 when I resigned from that insurance company and jumped out to be a full-time entrepreneur again. And I basically have been a full-time entrepreneur since then, with the exception of a couple of years after we sold that business. And you mentioned in the opening, Plato Consulting. We sold that business to KPMG, and I spent another couple of years working with KPMG. So I've been back and forth quite a bit, actually, the more I reflect on it.
I enjoy that, hearing about that journey, and I always am fascinated by folks who are doing the side hustle and then move into full-time entrepreneurship. So was it, just out of curiosity, something directly related to what you were doing on the side that eventually became your full-time entrepreneurial venture in those early days? After the insurance
days, the side hustles, and this is going back, say, the year 2000, 2001, 2002. Basically, the side hustle was I was introduced to a company that was expanding into Canada that distributed its services. It was a long-distance telecommunications company. They distributed their services through a concept called network marketing. And so I hustled with that on the side while working for the insurance company. And I'll be honest with you, I did okay with it. I'm not one of those people who lost a ton of money in network marketing schemes, but I really, the thing that I gained the most from was the training and the getting outside and stepping outside my comfort zone and presenting and sharing the opportunity and so on. So that was the side hustle back in the early 2000s that I was involved in.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And then that, once you, is that what ultimately led to your full-time entrepreneurial pursuits? Was it doing that full-time, or was it a whole other direction that you went from there?
So basically 2004, and I'm adding up a number of years here. So 2004, that while still doing it as a side hustle, that company ended up going bankrupt. And I just went back and began to refocus on the insurance company that I was working for. And I was, by this time, in a pretty senior position. I was director of e-business for this insurance company. So what happened then was, say 3 or 4 years later, 2006, I was reading the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Mm-hmm. And that book, somewhere in that book, or maybe in his second book, Cash Flow Quadrant, basically he said, if you want to be an entrepreneur but don't necessarily want to take the massive risk of quitting your job, or he suggested that you try a career in sales. And so what I ended up doing was finding a company that was they were established, and I sat with the owner of that company, and he hired me as their manager of business development, and that was Plato Consulting that I eventually became a part owner in, right? So I took Robert's advice, went into a career in sales, and learned that, I can do pretty good with sales. And I ended up taking that company, played a key role in the growth of that company, which we ultimately sold to KPMG.
So that leads really well into some of the things that we talked about in your introduction, and you ultimately wrote a book on sales. So yeah. Apparently something clicked there. And
well, yeah,
Robert. So were you, right off the bat, it sounds like maybe sales wasn't the fit that you thought it might be until you reframed a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about those early days of selling and what your mindset was around it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I left the insurance company, joined Plato Consulting, I had, like I mentioned, some experience with sales prior with the network marketing business. But I thought that sales was something that you had to be pushy. I had this model in my mind that sales was something that you did to people. And having joined this consulting business, not that I went out and tried to be pushy. I struggled with the idea of being pushy. So I basically joined the company and froze. I just didn't know what to do because I didn't want to go out and start pushing the company and its consulting services on people. So I froze, and I guess I was probably 6 months in and just wasn't gaining any traction, wasn't getting any results. And it really wasn't because of anything I was doing. It was because of stuff I wasn't doing. I just wasn't getting out and meeting people and forming good, solid, genuine relationships and so on. So I sat down and I had two options. Number one, figure it out and learn how to do it in a way that I felt good about, or give up on sales altogether and maybe go back to the insurance company or go back to another company where I could be sitting behind a desk all day. So I decided to take it upon myself and really learn how to sell in a way that was unique for me and that I felt good about. And that's where the story begins in terms of me becoming more effective and powerful in sales.
So what was that flip of the switch? What was your strategy then moving forward? And obviously you wrote an entire book about it, so maybe it's tough to summarize it as the response to a single question. But what I'm really getting at is I think that a lot of folks share that perception of sales, that they think of, the guy in the expensive suit who comes in, he's a fast talker, shakes your hand, and then talks you into a deal before you know what hits you. And that is not the type of sales you're talking about. So what is your perception and what are some of the tactical changes that you may have made?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my head goes to, with the answer to that is I basically had to reframe sales as something that, you're being of service, you're delivering value. The problems you solve for your clients are quite literally problems that possibly keep them up at night, and they are in their beds unable to sleep and they're worried about something, and so I began to realize that the solutions that I have in my back pocket, I'm the answer to those solutions those problems for these people. And the more I sat and meditated and thought about that, I noticed my energy begin to change from struggling to go and do it to, you know what, I need to get on top of the mountain and shout out that I can solve these problems. And so I would suggest that anyone who is listening, who is struggling with that identity around sales, part of it is forming a vision in your mind of doing sales, doing it with confidence and courage and so on, writing that out in a vision, and then spending time visualizing or meditating on the idea. Another little thing that I started to do is I started to write affirmations like, I am so happy and grateful now that I am a powerful and effective salesman for my product, and the more I read those to myself, the more I noticed I started to believe it, So those are just a couple of little things that I did to change my own image of sales, and lo and behold, it worked, because I'm like you. I'm after writing an article or two about it, but in early 1980s, the Electrolux vacuum cleaner door-to-door salesman showed up on my doorstep, and my mom and dad bought a $4,000 vacuum, which in today's dollars is $12,000. And then they thought about it for the next 3 or 4 months as they tried to figure out how to pay for it. So that was my image of sales prior to kind of flipping the switch on doing it in a more powerful way, right?
Right. And I'm fascinated by the process of writing out a vision and really sitting down and thinking through that to the point. I'm a big believer in it. I've actually created a course recently about creating a vision and setting goals. And I love that concept. So I would love to hear a little bit about your process when you talk about that, you know, what that means for you and how you think of creating a vision and how you suggest people might go about doing that.
Yeah, that's we're now speaking stuff that's really near and dear to my heart. I'm like you. I believe so much in vision. To be more effective at anything we do, we need to have a very key ingredient. And that key ingredient that I've narrowed it down to is self-motivation. And what does self-motivation look like? Self-motivation looks like having persistence, having confidence, having energy, physical energy, having the stick-to-itiveness to go and do the things that we necessarily are not wired to do. And the only way that I've been able to figure out how to fabricate self-motivation is to create an image on the screen of our minds of something that is so compelling that we, upon reading it or listening to it, we feel this burst of energy just to go out and do it, right? So I began writing visions for my life going back to, say 1997, 1998, when I just noticed I was going down the wrong path. I was in university and I was 280 pounds and not feeling good about myself and just eating way too much and not working out and so on. And I read something about writing a vision for your future that will motivate you to act. So I wrote a vision back then. And, what I ended up doing was within a year, losing a ton of weight, feeling better about myself. And that basically planted the seed that, this vision thing kind of works. And I've been writing visions for my life every year. And I don't believe we ever stop writing a vision. I write my vision every day. Like I read it, I have it in Evernote, and I'm always fine-tuning it and rewording it and getting myself more and more excited. I read my vision today and I get goosebumps on the back of my neck. That's a sign. That's a sign there's something in those words that are exciting, right? But maybe I can just answer what my process is for writing a vision. I've kind of boiled it down to sitting down, coming up with 30 goals, just brainstorming things that you want to be, do, and have in your life. Come up with a list of 30. Go through the list of 30 and put them into 3 buckets, A, B, and C. A being the ones that resonate the most, the ones you want the most in your life. And then go through your A bucket, B bucket, and C bucket and order them in a order of 1 to 10. So try to get 10 in each bucket. And what you're going to end up having then is your A1 goal. And then all you need to do is sit down and write out a story, but write it in the present tense, and encompass your senses. So you want to see it, you want to smell it, you want to touch it. Write this story that when you read it, you basically feel like you're in the story. You feel like you're living it right now. And that's how I write my visions. And I've obviously come a long way in the 20 years since I started writing visions, but I just believe in them so much. And I think anybody, and you know what? Everybody has a vision. Everyone listening to this recording has a vision. It's either a proactive, future-oriented vision, or it's a negative vision, or it's one that's just apathy, meaning you're where you are today. The vision is there, it's in your head, but I suggest everyone listening to be more proactive and write one on paper, because it's the only way to be, right? I mean, we're either growing or we're dying is what I often say. So let's make a conscious decision to grow versus let time pass by. Anyway, as you can tell, I'm passionate about this. I'll let you ask another question.
No, I'm a big fan of it. I wasn't about to stop you. And I think you're totally right. everybody has a vision, whether or not they put the intention behind it to ensure that it's a positive vision and it's taking them somewhere where they truly want to go is really the key difference there. And it sounds like you're a pretty well-read individual and have studied a lot of the personal development and successful individuals out there. And what I've seen in doing this and going down a similar path is that the folks who have achieved great levels of success, they had that vision for their life before they got there. So there's a lot of people I've come across this idea of, creating vision statements for your life and setting a vision for your life. And it's easy to think, well, that person's successful, so of course they're going to have a grand vision for their life because they've achieved this and now it's easy for them. But that never seems to be the case. They always seem to have been going through that process well before, like yourself, before the success was actually achieved, and that vision helped guide them there. So that's why I get so fascinated by this, and you're living proof of it.
Oh my God, yeah. Like you talk about gratitude. When you do this and you do it well, you wake up in the morning and you realize, oh my God, I'm living the vision that I had written for myself. And I don't know, there's this great sense of gratitude comes over you, right? Because unless you do that, you're basically in a reactionary mode, just letting days pass by, and that's not. I don't know. I don't think any of us want to be wired that way. So let's just make a decision to be different.
Yeah, and the other piece of it is that when you are intentional and you're trying to do big things, they tend to be challenging, and there tend to be moments in those journeys where you just feel stuck. You're having a rough go at it, and it just seems like it's an uphill battle. But when you have that vision to fall back on, you can remember that serves as your why. Simon Sinek goes deep into, start with your why. And I think of it as a very similar concept of, you can go back, and I love that you have it written in Evernote and you review it on a daily basis and you're tweaking it as you go on. And you can go and review that and say, that's right. Yes, this isn't the easiest. Today's a hard day, but this is why I'm doing it. This is the vision I have for my life, and it's all worth it. All that hard work is worth it because this is where I'm going and this is what it's going to help me achieve.
Absolutely. This last year, I'll just share this tip with you. I've been I've been adding a little new element to it. So I have it in Evernote, but I also have at the bottom of my Evernote vision, probably a dozen or so images. I'm sure you've heard of the idea of a vision board. So I brought into Evernote some images. And what I do is, after I've read my vision, I look at those pictures and I take my finger and I kind of trace out the outline of those pictures. And this is a technique I learned from a guy, Price Pritchett. He wrote the book called U Squared. And by taking your finger and tracing those pictures, your subconscious is really in the picture. Does that make sense? So it's just a little hack that I have added recently in the last year or so.
Nice.
I find really good.
I love it. Another area that I wanted to talk about with you, because it came up before we started and before we hit record here, and just resonates very strongly with me and my perspective on entrepreneurship and success, is the idea of putting content, positive, powerful, impactful content out in the world and using that as a launching ground for entrepreneurship. And so you shared that you wrote this book and it had somewhat of that effect. I would love if you would just share your journey with the book and what that's led to.
Yeah. So I mentioned my company, Plato Consulting. We sold it in 2013 to KPMG. I was with KPMG for a number of years, but almost immediately, and I was in a pretty high level position. I was vice president of sales for KPMG Canada. But I knew my future wasn't with such a large bureaucratic organization. So I made the decision I wanted to have a bigger impact. And I'd always set a goal in my mind that, if I ever make it, I'm going to write a book someday. And I had read a number of narratives over the years that had big impacts on me. I'm a big believer in the idea of narrative books. I mentioned earlier the idea that, we think, I don't think I said it specifically, but we think in pictures. And this is why visions are so important. We think in pictures, and a narrative book can have a real impact on us because a narrative is a picture. And so I had read a book many moons ago that was a narrative, and I said if I ever make it, I want to write a narrative. And so I decided to write my book. And I hired a coach, and away we went. And I realized as I was getting close to the end of the journey and ready to publish my book, that outside of my mom and dad, I had no one to buy it. so that kind of led me to starting the podcast. I said, you know what, I'm going to try to gain some exposure here. So this is back in 2015. So I started my podcast back then, and I started writing articles and publishing them on LinkedIn in the early days of LinkedIn's publishing platform. And all of that began to bubble up and then I started a newsletter every Sunday morning for the last, 4 years. I've been publishing a Sunday morning newsletter, which is, again, a narrative. It's a story that I send out to my newsletter subscribers. So anyway, I guess what I'm trying to get to with you is I am a big believer that when we start to share our ideas with people, and the proof is in the pudding. When I left my job in 2017 and began to get out there and start meeting entrepreneurs who may be interested in, hiring me as their sales consultant, I was very quick to gain my initial customers. And it was really because when I met these CEOs, they had already read my book, or they listened to my podcast, or they read my articles, and it was like I was on second base. It was like they knew me already. So anyway, I'm a big believer in the idea of sharing ourselves in the form of content, for sure.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it builds such credibility. And I think podcasts have a similar effect. And the fact that you're doing the podcast, the book, the articles, the newsletter, all compounds and really becomes a powerful force of content that can really create a brand that people can get behind, trust, and see you as positioned as this leader in the industry. And obviously had that effect.
I mentioned that I bypassed first base. The first base that I'm referring to is it's trust, credibility. So when I would meet with these business owners, there was assumed credibility, assumed trust, because they had read something that I had produced.
Yep, absolutely. So Chris, a question I love to ask guests when they come on the show, because oftentimes it's folks who have achieved some level of success, learned a whole bunch in their journey, is if you could hop in a time machine and go back and speak with your younger self. So maybe that younger you just getting out of university, is there one piece of advice, and maybe if you wouldn't necessarily change anything, because obviously everything has played its role in a special way to get you to this point, but is there any piece of advice that you wish you could impart on that younger Chris early on in your journey?
Yeah, my head goes to with that is the advice that I would have is believe that you're capable of immense things in life, right? We've grown up in an environment where we believe our environment basically dictates to us what we are capable of, and the reality is that we are capable of a whole lot more, and we just got to basically decide that we are going to go out and make it happen. So if you're listening to this and you're struggling, just decide tomorrow morning that you're going to go out and do something different and be something different, and that'll in turn make you have something different. So really, I really encourage anyone listening to throw off the blinders, throw off the veil of whatever it is you feel you're capable of, and just decide to be something bigger if that's exactly what you're trying to do. right?
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful piece of advice. And I think that it's so true. Oftentimes our biggest hindrance in achieving a higher level of success is ourself and our own mindset and limiting beliefs around what we can accomplish. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that definitely strikes a chord with me.
And write a vision. I mean,
yes.
take Brad's course or whatever it is you said you had going there. To me, fall in love with a picture that's greater than what you currently have, and that by doing that, you'll wake up and you will be just amazed at how far you've come. If you take it seriously and create a vision for your future that is more, that's compelling. I really believe in it.
Yes, I love it. Chris, where can people find you if they're interested in learning more about what you're up to, checking out the book, the podcast, any of that fun stuff?
Yeah, just my home on the web is chrisspurvey.com. Spurvey is how you spell my last name. You can go there, actually, and you can get a free version of It's Time to Sell. My book has done well. I've sold over 190,000 copies of it now, and you can actually get a free version of it on my website by just subscribing to my newsletter. Check it out. The podcast links are there as well, and I look forward. And feel free to reach out and say hi.
That's amazing. And I believe you self-published it, right?
I did. Yes. Best decision I ever made.
Yeah. And that's incredible success, not having any publisher backing that up, any other marketing dollars. So I think that speaks to the quality of the product in the book. Yeah. So it definitely
should check it out. The key to that was my book is very much geared towards anybody who can read my book and get something from it. People see the title and they think, oh, this is a sales book. But it's more than a sales book. And so what I've had is a lot of companies buy a lot of copies. I've had companies buy 6,000 and 7,000 copies of it for every employee. So that's how the sales have been generated.
Fantastic. Those are good days when you see a 7,000 copy order come through.
Yeah, I love it.
Very neat. Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time joining us here at the Millennial Mastermind. We had a blast talking with you, a really insightful conversation. So thanks for sharing all of the wisdom that you've collected over the years and taking some time to share it here with us.
Wonderful. I really appreciate it. And everybody listening, feel free to grab my book and have some fun with it.
Thanks, Chris. Hey guys, thank you for checking this episode out with Chris Spurvey. What a blast, huh? Cool guy. And if you are interested in checking out the course that I mentioned around setting a vision and your goals to really make sure that you're on track, your life is targeted towards the vision that you want to accomplish and that you're being proactive about that vision, head over to millennialmm.com and you can click on the resources tab and find that there. We priced it very, very inexpensively so that really anybody who wants to go down this journey of creating a better life and having more intention around what direction they're taking it can take that course. So go check it out. Again, it's under the resources tab at millennialmm.com. Would love for you to take that course, provide your feedback, and join our free community on Facebook and share what your vision statement looks like. All right, guys, have a great week.